NFL Week 14 is here, and so is special guest Adam Orphan to help us break it down from a betting perspective. I first crossed paths with Adam in the legendary forums of David Malinsky's Point Blank column, so you can bet the Malinsky Minute might be a bit longer than a minute this week when we get there. And since first crossing paths with Adam online, have also had the privilege of making it an annual rite of passage to bond in person at Bet Bash in Vegas every August. On the platform formerly known as Twitter, you can follow him at aorphan67. Adam, welcome to Props and Hops.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you again. Big fan of the show.
Good to see you again as well. Big fan of everything that you do publicly and maybe not as publicly as we've discussed at times at Bet Bash. So glad we can connect in this slightly more public form. And to kick things off, Adam, I always love to just get things rolling by asking any first-time guest on the show to tell us about the journey to up to this point, just more broadly about your background in betting.
Sure. I mean, I discovered the daily lines early as a kid. I was big into baseball and all sports, but we would cut out the box scores, and at the bottom of the page of the box scores was the daily line. So I found out about them pretty quick, asked my father about, what is this? He would tell me, and, we would be betting amongst friends that way. Got a little older, and for those of you into video games, I mean, I'm old enough where the first Atari Pong game was the first one that on the market that I had. Mattel came out with something called Intellivision, and the cartridge that came with it was called Poker and Blackjack. So at a young age, I learned blackjack. I learned 5-card draw, 5-card stud was on there. The family played poker, grandparents and stuff. So I was always into gambling at a recreational, level, of course. A little older, friend's machine shop brought in parlay cards. And I know a lot of people, that's their gateway, did that. And then once I turned 21, a big thing happened. And we went to Reno because we lived in the Bay Area. So we went to Reno more than Vegas. And went up there with a group of guys. We started at one end of the strip where we were staying. And when I got to the Cal Neva, Chris Andrews and Roxy were running this place. We got to the third floor in the Cal Neva, and it was the sports book and the poker room. And I mean, this is going to sound really dumb. I had no idea as a kid that there was, people would deal poker to you. You just sat there, drank, played cards. So that and the sports book were there. And I just fell in love with the place. And so I would go up there quite often during football season. There was characters in the sports book that were unbelievable, learned a lot of stuff just talking to people there, and just kind of fell in love with the whole idea of it then. And then, then life happened. And, I didn't even know that, at that time that people bet professionally, their hundreds of thousands of dollars are being wagered. I'm just a working kid, So the next era of my life got interesting. I had a daughter who was born 24 weeks premature, or at 24 weeks, that had a lot of medical conditions. This kind of changed my whole life big time, but it gave me a lot of time at home and on the computer. And I got back into football in a big way because I got a job and they had, football contests, and I'm playing with people that don't know anything about football, and I'm losing. I'm like, what is this? So I Googled NFL handicapping, and what popped up was pregame and their forums. And so I jumped onto that and discovered Dave and other people, obviously, and then just kind of dove into that. It piqued my interest. And, that was about the time, I believe, when Dave and Steve were doing the original Dream Pod with RJ. And that really shaped or kind of lit the seed in me to want to learn this and get better at it. And so, that kind of led to that happening, taking place for a few years. And then ultimately things changed with my daughter. Her health got better. It wasn't as serious. And then we got sports betting in Arizona, where I felt like I was able to apply a lot of things I had been learning over the years with multiple outs. I did offshore, but only funded a couple accounts because, that was just where I was at in life. But once we got the multiple legal shops, I could apply a lot of the principles that I had been learning and try different things. And that opened things up big time. And then obviously Bet Bash really changed everything, where I was doing everything alone. I went to the first Bet Bash, not knowing anybody, but having relationships with people on Twitter. But I had I had a networking session with Scott Vegas Horse Pools that I know you know and most people watching know well. And really that 2-minute, whatever that was, that changed everything for me. And it was as simple as I told him, I didn't know anybody at Bet Bash. I go, if I could just meet one person here that like wanted to talk football, back and forth, I would feel like this whole thing was worth it. And that led to multiple groups and then meeting people that I had no idea that I would be rubbing shoulders with. So that has changed my whole betting process. Now I'm, working with a couple people doing stuff. Now I work full time. I'm not a pro by any stretch. I know I have a very stressful job, on call 24/7, supporting a data center, but I, love football and I work on it every minute of the day that the job is not in the way, so to speak. And so, meeting people and just learning what they're doing, bouncing ideas off, that has really stepped the game up and made things pretty fun. And, my whole thing is let's learn something new each day if we can and just see what other people are doing. And, it seems to be, it's worked out really well.
Can you elaborate a bit more on how your betting might look different today than it did a few years ago as a direct result of the relationships you've built and the groups that you've started to work with coming out of your time attending Bet Bash?
Sure. I mean, so typically my work is just NFL. I don't, because of the job and, when I was taking care of my daughter, you only got so much bandwidth. And sure. Most people will probably tell you college football is a much more profitable way to go. My passion and love is with the NFL. It started that as a kid. And so I've slowly morphed. Started with some spreadsheets, some numbers, picking up things from people. And so I use a numbers-based approach to set some ratings. And then I just picked up little things from each people along the way, really at each Bet Bash. And then through these text groups that we've established since then with some very smart people, you pick up things. And so I just try to add a little bit kind of to what I'm doing each year, maybe tweak something. I'll come up maybe with a theory on something, research that. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So I'm always looking to kind of add stuff to the arsenal or add, metrics that I'm tracking to try to improve things. So that, and then now that I've met some people, so now I'm working with a couple people and they do things completely different, professional betting groups, helping them out, doing stuff. And so I get to bet with them on how they're doing it. I still do my thing as well, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I owe Spanky a huge debt of gratitude. Just want to say that right off the top.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a sentiment that's quite common across the audience of the show and even a lot of guests who have been on it over the years. And I heard you speak to looking to add new things to your arsenal as a result of working with some really sharp people. I also wonder sometimes about the notion of addition by subtraction in betting. Personally, pretty early on this season, I started to get the sense, small sample size, a few weeks into a season, but I started to get the sense that with sides and especially full game totals, there just might not be enough of an edge there, the way that I comprehend things and the way that I bet, to continue to invest too much time or too much of my bankroll in spots like that. Mm-hmm. So I made a pretty conscious decision to do less in those areas and start to reallocate that time and bankroll to areas where I do feel like I have more of an edge. While you said you're looking to add new pieces to your arsenal, have there been any aspects of your betting game over the years that you've also maybe seen some of your own form of addition by subtraction?
I don't know about addition by subtraction exactly, but one thing I've discovered over the last 2 years, some of the metrics that I'm tracking seem to line up where you can identify when certain games are going to be really close games. And I've actually, so I was tweaking with this a little bit last year in the middle of the season. It seems to go in ebb and flows, but this year I just, before to prepare for this, I just kind of went through my spreadsheet, and I'm showing 47.9% of all NFL games played this year are falling in the band of 1 to 6 points. So I've been tweaking with those scoring bands as adding them to, I kind of took this from the fantasy guys. I'll talk about laddering up, when they like a certain guy, all these things. So what I've been doing is incorporating like a side. And if it's one of these games that identifies that it's going to be pretty close, I might, do some of these scoring bands along with it to augment it. I mean, one example, last week I had Indianapolis in the -2.5, but I also threw the 1-6 scoring band in there. So it turned a loser into a little bit of a winner, but so I'm trying to kind of add things along those lines to augment either the side. I don't really do a lot of totals. I'm more of a side, half times, alt lines. I like doing that. Teasers, of course. I do 2-leg stuff with alt totals and not alt totals, but alt spreads, things like that. It's kind of what I've been successful with as of late.
So it sounds like you're clearly doing your homework. And I also heard you when it comes to having a demanding job, being on call 24/7. How do you go about balancing your passion and all the genuine work you put into betting with life's other obligations?
I mean, it's tough, but it's, you just get used to it. So, I mean, I guess I've been prepared for this with my daughter and doing the data center. Basically, in both of those arenas, there's a disaster around the corner coming. I just don't know when it is. It's coming. And so I guess my mentality has just shaped it like, if things are smooth right now and there's nothing bothering me, okay, that's when I'll really dive in and do as much NFL homework as I can. And then when something happens and it hits the fan and I've got to go respond, you just got to go respond and deal with it, So even like these betting partners I got, they understand that. And it's like, if I'm stuck in a process at work, well, there's nothing I can do, and that's just kind of the life I've accepted and, modified myself around it. And, it seems to be working at the moment.
That reminds me of a couple concepts that have really been top of mind for me recently across various walks of life. One of them being stay ready and you don't have to get ready. And
Right.
this can apply whether I'm training for a half marathon or going through my own grueling stretch at work or anything in life. But keeping that mentality so that when things do arise, it doesn't hit you on your heels. You can maybe play offense as opposed to defense, so to speak. And also, I think of the notion of, all right, if things are going really poorly, stay the course. It's probably going to change at any moment. And if things are going really well, stay the course, and it's probably going to change at any moment.
Yeah.
So
and everybody else wants to.
Yeah.
So
yes. And to that end of staying the course, as we do on this show, want to go ahead and dive in before we get too much deeper. When it comes to the Week 14 NFL betting board, Adam, I have a prop and a teaser that I'll run by you. But first off, want to hand it over to you. When it comes to any markets, it could be sides, totals, teasers, props, or beyond. Anywhere that you're seeing value on the NFL Week 14 betting board right now.
So I'll tell you, my typical process is I don't usually get all my bets together until Friday. I like to get the injury information as best I can. But I knew I was coming on this with you and you'd be asking. So where I stand right now is I like Green Bay and the 3.5 points. And that game also, I think, profiles potentially as one of these close ones. So I might be throwing one of those 1-6 bands on Green Bay to augment that as well. And then I know your prop and hops Super Bowl staple bet of the shortest touchdown. I know about that one. So my other favorite one in the Super Bowl is the one team to score 3 times. And we've actually been playing that a lot this year, and it's been pretty successful. So we did place a bet on that on the Thursday night game for the one team to score 3 straight times. So those are the kind of the 2 things I could tell you about this week at the moment.
I appreciate that. And I have 2 questions when it comes to that team to score 3 straight times wager. First off, in the Super Bowl, my understanding has been that it's often mispriced because, especially for an event as big as the Super Bowl, a lot of bettors will flood the marketplace, and recreational money can have much more influence than it would in a typical sporting event. And recreational money gravitates much more toward the line of risk a little to win a lot, as opposed to laying seemingly significant vig. So teams score 3 straight times in a game way more often than somebody might think. Oftentimes the subtle edge people fail to account for is the team might score at the end of the first half and come out in the second half receiving the kickoff. So you can score 3 straight times without your defense having to make 3 straight stops. So in a Super Bowl, I see where the market dynamics can make that appealing. Are you seeing similar pricing in regular season games now that a lot of regulated books have really expanded their menus?
So I've been seeing it. What we've been playing, I've been seeing anywhere from like -125 to up to -180, depending on the perceived matchup. Now, one of the things I want to do this off season is do a deep dive into this and really look at, how many times this is happening, if it's correlated to large spreads versus small spreads, the teams that are familiar with each other. I don't really have the insight on that yet. I just know that, because we've been playing this bet, it's been hitting at a nice clip. So that's one of my off-season projects. I want to dig into this a little bit and see, if we can find a little bit more on this.
Yeah, and that ties in with the second question I had, so I'll see if I can maybe tease just a bit more out of you here. My first thought with regard to the Packers-Lions matchup, it's got the highest total on the board, and that could possibly bode well for the prospects of a team scoring 3 straight times if we're going to see more scoring in general. At the same time, with a tight spread, is it saying this might be more of a back-and-forth affair, so the high total might get negated by a tighter point spread? Wondering how much you look at totals and how much you look at point spreads when trying to back into a fit to go ahead and bet a team to score 3 straight times.
Yeah, I think I focused on the spread more, but again, we're betting it on price a lot of times, and so I haven't really, and this is what I want to do. I want to deep dive this in the summer to kind of get into the weeds of that to see if there's more to learn, So I don't think I have a great answer for you at the moment on that, but that's my perception on it at the moment.
All right, well, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. And Adam, let's just go ahead and dub the Thursday night football game the props and hops game of the week. So hopefully this can be of value to the audience catching us live, listening early in podcast form, because the one prop I have this week also involves the Thursday night game. Probably not going to surprise you or a lot of regular listeners, but I'm going to turn to the patron prop of props and hops, Green Bay, Detroit, shortest touchdown under 1.5 yards in the Thursday night matchup. I'm seeing this at -170 at BetOnline, -175 at DraftKings. Good in my book, up to -180. So we've still got a little bit of wiggle room. When it comes to the math here, again, highest total on the board at 51.5. Points, good for the odds of more touchdowns, good for the odds of at least one 1-yard touchdown. And from a matchup-driven perspective here, Detroit has been a meal ticket for this prop, to borrow from David Malinsky's lexicon. Looking at the players they've got, a strong ground game behind a stout offensive line, and from a coaching standpoint, aggressive decision-making on 4th and short. When we look at Green Bay as well here, their ground game, I think, is also set up for success against a depleted front 7 for Detroit's defense, and coaching similarly aggressive on 4th down. I like that this can increase the odds of a 1-yard touchdown down the road on certain drives when other teams that are a bit more conservative might settle for field goal attempts. So Adam, all that said, any initial thoughts on a bit of a steep price, laying up to -180, but eyeing shortest touchdown under 1.5 yards for Packers Lions?
No, I like that. I absolutely like that, especially with your high total. I think that's always felt like that's been a correlated situation with that bet.
Yeah, it really has been. And I feel like the pricing has started to catch up over the years. But when you get the right matchup with enough wiggle room on the price point, still like to pull the trigger from time to time. And this seems like one of those situations that warrants a go. So I'll chalk that up as my prop for this week. One teaser to run by you as well. And this is not the juiciest teaser card by any stretch. So even 6, 6.5, 7-point options, pretty sparse right now, but I was pleasantly surprised to see something that's intriguing me quite a bit as far as a 10-point teaser could go. Now, these would be 3-team 10-point teasers laying -130. That's the standard price point. And I'll walk through each leg and then see what you think here, Adam. First up, going in rotation order, taking Pittsburgh up to +3.5, hosting Cleveland. We've got a spread of Steelers -6.5, shaded towards 7. In fact, we're already seeing soft 7s at Circa and Bookmaker. So I feel like we're effectively getting 10.5 points for the price of 10 in this leg. Situationally, not going to give it too much weight, but I do like that we've got Cleveland in a back-to-back road game situation on a short week after that Monday night marathon in Denver. A bit of hesitation here for me, trying to look at both sides of the coin in any bet that I make. We've got quite a bit of variance with both quarterbacks. Jameis Winston can be feast or famine, or both feast and famine, as we saw on Monday night. Russell Wilson also quite reliant on the deep ball these days. The nudge for me to go ahead and get in play on this leg, though, liking the angle of a superior team at home to simply stay within a field goal, if not win the game outright. Adam, I'll pause there. Any initial thoughts on a look at the Steelers as the first leg of this teaser?
I personally am sick of losing money going against Pittsburgh, so I'm with you. And I want to also say this. I'm a huge Jameis Winston guy. I've been screaming for this guy to play. I don't know what he was doing on the bench in New Orleans when they weren't winning in Carr. I was like, why were you not putting this guy in? I love him. I love what he does to the game. But, after that crushing defeat, so to speak, in a short week, second road game in Pittsburgh, I'm down with the Steelers on this game too.
All right, 1-for-1. We'll see if we can tack on 2 more legs for some consensus here. If not, that's all good. Feel free to shoot straight, but I'll get to the second leg. Staying in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia -2.5 hosting Carolina. A parallel to the first leg, bookmakers at -13 for this game. So again, it's almost like getting 10.5 points for the price of 10. The hesitation in this game for me is that Carolina has shown legitimate signs of improvement lately, so they could be frisky in this one. But the nudge for me to go ahead and get in play with this leg. The Eagles, still the vastly superior team at home, needing to do little more than win outright. So a simpler handicap for me as far as this game is concerned. Adam, any thoughts on your end when it comes to Eagles-Panthers?
Yeah, the Panthers really intrigue me. Eagles had that big game against Baltimore, and then they're playing Pittsburgh next week, which is an in-state rivalry. So this feels like the complete look ahead spot. Now, something interesting my spreadsheet showed me on Carolina. Their last 4 games, and that includes their bye. So over the last 4 weeks, they've got 2 of their 3 wins, and they've lost by 3 points in the other 2 games. Prior to that, they lost by double digits every single game, and then they smoked the Raiders by 14 in week 3. It really feels like Canales the change is starting to happen there in Carolina. Their weaknesses are the Eagles' strength. But I think I'm going to be on Carolina and the points, at some point over the weekend. Now, that doesn't say that the 10-point teaser on Philadelphia, I don't necessarily disagree with that, because they're going to just have to win the game by a few points. But I'm really intrigued by Carolina, to be honest with you. I see changes happening right now in the middle of the season, and that's where I kind of land on that at the moment.
Yeah, very fair points, and I appreciate a little bit of dissent there, or maybe more of a neutral stance, understanding that Carolina has perhaps been turning a corner. And as much as I'm not one for narratives, the letdown spot, the sandwich spot, the look-ahead spot, whatever you want to call it for Philadelphia, really tough to quantify, but at times it can be real. And if it does mean anything, it would only probably be working in Carolina's favor here. So I understand that, and in proceeding with some caution, this would not be a full go for me, but I still think I like it enough to include it in this teaser, partly because when I look at the third leg to round this out, I like a look at Arizona +7.5 hosting Seattle. In line with the first 2 legs, we have a spread of 2.5 shaded toward the 3, a soft 3 currently showing at circa. So once again, we're effectively getting 10.5 points for the price of 10. I love extracting as much juice as I can from a teaser when it comes to the pure numbers like that. And looking at the matchup here, Arizona specifically off a misleading stretch of back-to-back losses. They played a coin flip game at Seattle in week 12. And then I think they outplayed the Vikings in Minnesota for much of that game last week. So all that considered, 7 points, an appealing cushion for me for a team that I frankly like to win outright. Any thoughts on Arizona +7.5 is the third leg in this teaser?
Yep. I live in Phoenix in Arizona. I was high on the Cardinals this whole year from a win total standpoint going in. And when you look back at the game against the Seahawks a couple weeks ago, they're really dominating the whole game until Kyler Murray does this bonehead, pick 6 on 4th down. He eats that ball. The Cardinals felt to me like they were in control of that game. Now, I know Seattle's getting a lot of love. They've done a lot of things. They've gotten some pretty variants go their way the last 2 weeks to win a couple games here. So I am high on the Cardinals this week as well. These divisions, the NFC West, it seems like every year, you pick the dog and they split the games. It just seems to be the way that division goes. So I fully endorse that one.
All right, 2 firm endorsements. The Eagles may well be the fly in the ointment here. So again, not unloading on this one. Lock is not a part of my vocabulary on this show. I'm going to call it 0.8 of a unit on a 3-team 10-point teaser, laying no more than -130 on Pittsburgh +3.5 hosting Cleveland, Philadelphia -2.5 hosting Carolina, and Arizona +7.5 hosting Seattle. Now, Adam, I'm really excited to dive a bit more into your process and, of course, the hops in the Malinsky Minute. But before we turn the page on Week 14 in the NFL, anything else that you'd like to talk about as far as this week's betting market is concerned?
The only thing I will say is this is a week where a lot of teams that I want to bet against are playing each other. So I'm in a little bit of quandary early on in the week, to be honest. This is an interesting week. So honestly, I haven't really gotten all the information I want to kind of come up with where I'm going to land come later in the weekend, other than kind of what we've talked about, a couple, games. So that's just kind of where I'm at in the stage of the week.
Totally makes sense. We've got more complete information on Green Bay, Detroit than we do for any other game, naturally being within about 24 hours of that kickoff versus several days from the other games kicking off. So a lot to chew on for Thursday night. A little bit lighter volume this far as Sunday is concerned, but that's okay. Oftentimes the prudent thing to do if you don't have conviction is to stay on the sidelines. And of course, leading up to kickoff, you may well get in play on quite a bit more. And if you do, I'm guessing that's going to be driven in large part by your betting process. So I'll be excited to dive into that in just a moment here.
Okay.
So one thing I recall from our joint appearance on Chicken Dinner with Sammy P in October was your contest experience. You guys touched on Circa Million, Last Man Standing, Westgate's regular season win total contest. Overall, before diving in any deeper, would love to hear, beyond all the sides, totals, in the more standard betting markets, if you will, that we just discussed for a weekly basis like Week 14 this week in the NFL, could you describe your overall approach to more of the season-long contest angles that you're into?
Sure. I mean, I love the win total contest. It's almost my favorite one, even though it's not the high dollar thing that, Survivor and Circa Millions brings. But I guess what I like about it, kind of going back to the poker analogy, when you're betting win totals, it's, you're basically betting your whole cards and waiting for the flop of the season to come and everything to unfold. In tracking win totals over the last few years and been playing this contest, I truly believe this is the best way to bet the NFL from a point A to point B scenario. Granted, you're tying up your money all year long. I get most people don't want to do that. But I really feel like that market is a lot more beatable than the week-to-week grind is. So I actually approach everything in the offseason through the lens of the win totals, and then through a couple different filters of how we're looking at those win totals, breaking them down conference, division, and then really deep dive into schedule to kind of set things in motion for the season. And then obviously as the season unfolds, what we thought was going to happen, doesn't happen. and you just have to be able to pivot to different things. But I don't know. I guess I just love the win totals before the season starts, because instead of the game, we talk about variance all the time in these games and the way they're ending, at least with the win totals, you're not really, it's not one event ending. It's a series of events. And, I just feel like it's been a profitable thing, how to handle the NFL. And so I use that as a big point of my beginning the season process.
And with that in mind, how would you compare and perhaps contrast your approach to contests with your approach to some of the more popular weekly betting markets?
So I feel like the contest and the weekly betting are like apples and oranges, two different things, So with contest play, a lot of people want to chase the line moves. I don't really think that's such a great idea per se. I'm thinking more probably game theory and trying to avoid the popular picks is kind of the tact I've taken with the point spread type contest over the years. Now, I'll be frank, this year I'm not doing so well in that scenario, but over the years that has been done well for me. So that's kind of how I approach the contest, typically week to week.
Got it. And I think part of what I heard you say to Sammy P as well was that you really study the schedule. And it sounds like that uncovers a lot of value for you. But I wonder how you go about balancing some of the apparent edges you come across through studying the schedule with some of the inherent variance you touched upon, not just game to game, but even variance with something like predicting strength of schedule.
Oh yeah. It's difficult. I'll give you two examples. I, like a lot of people, probably got sucked into the Aaron Rodgers Jets love this season, and my questions going in was Kirk Cousins coming off these injuries. So my gut said we need to be going under on both of these teams, because I don't know how these old guys are coming back from the injuries. But the schedules for both of those teams looked so soft that I couldn't do it. So I'm going to miss on both of those teams for sure. But, and I've been thinking about that a lot this year as the years unfolded. Like, have I put too much credence in what I'm perceiving to be a soft schedule, and not really approaching the team as a whole, as, what is their potential and really, what do we think they're going to end up doing? So it's a little bit of a tap dance, I think as the season unfolds and we were wrong on some things, I think it's easier when you're wrong to kind of get off that and pivot and then not let that influence you. But let's not kid ourselves. Anyone who bets futures or has things that, that's in your mind as you're placing weekly bets on some level. I know Las Vegas Chris talks about, separating the two. And I mean, he's awesome. He's got such great information, but, I try to do that, but I'm just being the human being that I am, and the weaknesses of our minds, it's sometimes hard to do that, And so again, that's just another part of the process trying to improve on.
Yeah, I think part of why Las Vegas Chris talks about that is because, if I'm understanding correctly, he himself struggles with it as much as anybody. So it's knowing that ideally we will compartmentalize and make rational decisions, but it's often easier said than done. So to that end, Adam, beyond everything else that you just outlined, I'm curious as to how you use your schedule studying to bet into outside the box markets beyond sides and totals.
Boy, I don't know if I have a great example to share with you on that. Because
an example I'll give you is not to get too repetitive from a Sammy P conversation, but I think you said there was somebody for the first month of the season, this certain player to lead the league in, I don't remember, it was passing or rushing or receiving yards.
Yeah, there was a prop.
Yeah, finding outside the box props or futures to kind of put your study of scheduling into use beyond season-long contests.
Right. So what you're referring to is there was a prop on who would have the most passing yards after week 4. And so as I was doing the scheduling, Seattle caught my eye, but on how soft their schedule was initially. And, we know Geno Smith can throw the ball around. So he was priced at I want to say it was 28-1 at FanDuel or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So I only bet him just because of the schedule that we discovered kind of in doing this. To be honest with you, I probably should be expanding that more potentially, but on the flip side, I think that worked good for 4 weeks of the season, for that kind of a window versus if, we're getting way deep into it, because what we perceive at the beginning of the season, no matter how good you are, you're going to be wrong on, a decent amount of it. So I don't know how much value the preseason schedule holds later on, but I do feel for that first, 4 games or so of the season, when we really don't know who these teams are. I mean, we think we do, that you can find some stuff there, So I think I might even dig into that a little bit more this next off season, to be honest.
Got it. And I was thinking, as we get deeper into the season beyond the first month, maybe your study of the schedule will lead you to continue firing on regular season win totals in selective spots based on a team's remaining schedule, even if we are halfway through the season, or in a case like this, 13 weeks into a season. But based on your last answer, I'm guessing maybe that's not the safest assumption in terms of how you approach things.
I haven't really got into the win totals mid-season, to be honest with you, because I've done stuff before. So I'm kind of just letting that go. But again, this could be more of a time, bandwidth for me. Maybe I need to be focusing on that. That could be something I need to pick up, in the repertoire.
Yeah, with all the downtime you've got, for sure.
Yeah,
exactly. So not trying to overload you here, but so much good food for thought. So always fun to riff on it. And Adam, in addition to your own personal betting process, I understand you to be quite the betting content connoisseur. As we've noted earlier, you and I connected via Point Blank initially. We also appeared together on Chicken Dinner. We're speaking now on Props and Hops, so I think it's safe to assume there's some similar taste in play here. But I'm also always open to new ideas And to that end, I'm wondering if there are any top sports betting content recommendations you care to share with this audience.
Sure. So first thing I will say is when we were getting ready to go legal in Arizona a few years ago, I made the conscious effort, no ESPN, no NFL network. I'm not listening to anybody that's just hot taking crap and talking football about narrative stuff. I want to listen to people who are talking about the betting markets. So I really consume, I mean, honestly, because when I'm at work, I can consume a lot of podcasts, because there is downtime when you're doing things. So I try to listen to pretty much betting content all the time. I mean, it's kind of my entertainment. I don't watch regular TV shows. I'm not interested in that. It's sports and that's all. So I love consuming, content from people. And I want to just say to those who put it out, I appreciate you all tremendously. I can't believe, like, I had this conversation with Sammy, they're putting out picks for people. The bartender's putting out his picks. And these idiots on Twitter are getting mad because the picks lose. And it's like, I never understand people's mentality of ripping someone who's putting something out for free, trying to share something with you, and then other people taking offense when it doesn't win. I mean, that's just very short-sighted and really immature if you really want the truth. But I appreciate all you guys that put out content because, I view you all as my buddies because, I'm listening to it all the time, picking up things, and I just feel that's a healthy mindset for betting and just turning off the other TV and not listening, I have no interest in local sports talk or any of that kind of crap.
Yeah, I'll pause if I may for a moment and also return the gratitude to you because I bet whether it's Sammy P or others that are in our orbit, the only interactions I've ever had with you have been positive, whether it's on Twitter, which can be a cesspool at times, or in any other form. Everything has always been so positive. So I think in a lot of ways, you get what you give. So I want to give credit where it's due and say that the positivity that you share with others probably goes a long way in the positivity that you pick up on from the time you spend listening to content across the space.
Well, thank you. I mean, I Twitter is an interesting place, because of, I would say, difficulties of some things in the life that we've had, I tried to view everything as positive. And, no matter how bad something is at the moment, it's going to get better. Like you said earlier about the ebbs and flows of our betting. You could be hot for a while and then you're down and you're down. It's going to turn if you keep it up. So just for my mental well-being, I choose to be positive. I know it's very easy to get sucked into negativity, and I've been guilty of it as well on Twitter. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. But to me, a healthy state of mind is to be more positive, and I think complimenting people or relationships with people is way more important than any given result, and while it's easy for everyone to throw insults and disparage people, that doesn't help anyone grow, and I don't know everything. I don't know, there's so many people who know way more than me, but people with the ego, I don't know. I don't think that's going to last long term. If you're looking for clickbait stuff, okay, I guess that gets people, but that's just not my bag.
Yeah, I think we're like-minded in that sense. So if I may follow up on the initial question, a lot of good context you've shared on the approach you take to what content you do or intentionally do not consume. But when it comes to any specific recommendations, it could be podcasts, Twitter follows. Is there anything that really stands out to you right now in terms of specific content recommendations that you care to share with this audience?
Sure. So I really like what the guys and gals down at the South Point studios are doing. I really I try to retweet when they put their stuff up because I think they need more eyeballs. Their weekly football show on Fridays with Jimmy and Chris and Vinny. To me, that's one of the best shows of the week. I think that should be must watch for everybody. I've also gotten to know those guys. All this is tied to Bet Bash, and me and Chris, we went way back. So to meet him again, that was just amazing for me, just as a personal level. But those, when you like the people too, obviously you want to support them. But I really like what they're doing in that South Point Studio show, and I would definitely recommend, if you're not listening to it regularly, to get in there and check it out.
Got it. And I will call myself out here. I am vaguely familiar with the show, but it's not a regular part of my arsenal like it probably should be. Is this something, if somebody heard you describe it, sounds interested, they can follow on Twitter or YouTube, or what's the easiest way for somebody to catch on to it if it would be new to them?
Yeah, so they have a YouTube channel. That's how I consume it. Jeff Parles and Alex White, Kenny White's daughter, they do shows throughout the week, and then this Friday show is with the other guys. And I got to meet both of them this last year a little bit, and they're both very sharp, very nice people. You know, I like what they're doing. They're doing it right, in my opinion, the way they present stuff. I would recommend anyone, if you haven't checked them out, definitely check them out. You know, they're good guys and gals, and they're doing it right, in my opinion.
Yeah, solid endorsement there. I appreciate you bringing that up. And Adam, I also heard you say a few minutes ago that listening to sports betting content or watching certain sports betting content is how you spend your downtime. For a lot of us, the hops are a good way to spend some downtime. And I understand that in a past life, when you were in San Diego, there was the opportunity to take advantage of an unparalleled local beer scene. Curious for anything you have to share about how that experience was for you.
Sure. So just to kind of get others up to speed, I quit drinking alcohol like 9 years ago. And for me, it was a great thing, you know, but what is the guy coming on Props and Hops that didn't drink alcohol? But I used to love it. So when I was in San Diego, I knew about the Arrogant Bastard. I forget what's the name of that brewery.
Yeah, Stone Brewing.
Stone, yeah. So I knew about them. They were good. One of my hangouts was Pizza Port in Carlsbad. I lived in Oceanside. I know you're from the area, but they used to make some amazing beers, and some of them had such high volume that they'd only give you 2 of them or something a day. And I enjoyed all that. Now I wanted to ask you, because I'm from the Bay Area, and Gordon Biersch, you know, was like one of the first ones I remember, and I always liked them. And I don't know where do they stand in like how this whole craft beer thing unfolded, or were they part of the revolution, so to speak, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would need to do my homework to speak with more conviction as to exactly what role they played in the craft beer scene really blowing up when it did and the way it did. But when I hear you mention Gordon Biersch, I think a bit of a place like Karl Strauss in San Diego, or
right.
even a place like BJ's. These are, you know, I guess brew pubs may be the right term. They're often known for their food. They are restaurants that also have good craft beer that they make in-house or may contract from other local spots. But yeah, I know Evan Price, who is the brewmaster at Green Cheek Beer Company, my favorite brewery, and they are just cleaning up when it comes to any competitions, winning awards left and right in the space. He got his start at BJ's. A lot of people have worked at Karl Strauss or a Gordon Biersch and gone on to do their own things. So as far as I know, there's a lot of respect for a place like Gordon Biersch for, you know, how big of a role it played in getting the industry rolling.
Right.
But it is also in some ways maybe just discriminatory, but maybe too old or too big to have a seat at the cool kids table in the craft beer scene these days. That said, they definitely have some, you know, between being OGs and having a lot of street cred. I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay, cool. I was just kind of wondering about that, you know.
Yeah, well, when it comes to what you're up to these days, I think if I'm recalling correctly from Bet Bash, maybe edibles would be a fair substitute for the hops. And I know next to nothing about this, so I'd love it if I'm correct in that understanding. If you could tell us about how you incorporate that into your day-to-day life these days.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm pro cannabis on all levels, just right up front, you know. So the edibles are great in situations where, you know, smoking's a problem, let's say. You know, and I guess it's something that a lot of people who maybe are not cannabis connoisseurs are more open to a gummy, you know, and so just it's popular with amongst a bunch of people. So, you know, I've always taken the approach, you know, I like to party back in the day, you know, I enjoy people getting together and having a good time. So every year at Bet Bash, I'm making sure I'm bringing plenty of them and sharing with friends and, you know, just trying to enhance everybody's time together. You know, I mean, so it's all, I mean, again, it's a personal choice, you know, if whether you like to go down that road or not. I feel like most people, you know, the taboo is kind of gone on it that from when we were younger and, you know, definitely what my parents and stuff were going through. So I would much rather hang out with people smoking than getting drunk and doing stupid things. But, let's face it, in both spots, you have to have a little common sense and, keep your cools, whatever you're doing. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, edibles maybe being more approachable than other forms of cannabis, I'm reminded of, I think this would have been 2017 rolling into 2018 New Year's Eve. I would have to confirm with Teddy Covers, but I believe that he gave our dear friend Dave Malinsky a cookie, and it was perhaps Dave's first foray into that. And I remember Dave
Oh,
talking about his
wow.
plan to have a couple of beers and then enjoy the cookie and then just fade away into the new year. I think it might have had
Right.
Turner Classic Movies on, which Chris Andrews and the guys at the South Point would probably endorse as well. So things are really coming full circle here. And Adam, I'll use that as a way to transition into a very special edition of the Malinsky Minute. I was going to lead it off by asking how you discovered Dave, but I should have figured you went ahead and addressed that right off the top here. So I'll jump ahead to move this right along. What was it like for you to follow Dave's work on a daily basis?
It was a game changer for me. It really was. I learned so much once I found that community. And, to me, the best thing about it is it was a safe place, meaning I was a recreational mindset better, when I discovered that. And he, with his wisdom, would not, if you asked a question that was, silly to some pro better, he had a very elegant way of, either directing you or explaining it to where you would understand. And,
Yes.
just that safety, and even the forum, no one was attacking each other. They were supportive or whatever. So those were really crucial years for me, and really, really planted the seed of like, I really want to do this, and I want to get involved with people who are doing this, because there wasn't this vitriol and this, stuff that you see so much everywhere. So I actually, after he passed, I started to go through all the posts, and, I started to cut and paste and keep things for little reminders and stuff. And every once in a while I go and revisit them. I did one this today, getting ready to come on with you, and, just reading through this stuff. And I actually listened to a couple of the old podcasts. I was listening to one 10 years ago they were doing, and believe it or not, 10 years ago, they were discussing how bad the Jets quarterback's position had been for so long, and it was still bad. And here we are another 10 years later, and I don't know, it's changed. So, so it was great. I mean, I miss him so much.
Yeah, I think you're spot on multiple fronts there. One, Dave was the master of meeting anybody at their level. He could go toe-to-toe with the sharpest minds in the game, and he could meet a complete newcomer at their level, and to your point, speak very elegantly and make it a very welcoming environment. And also that trickled down to the entire Point Blank community. I mean, that was a space where a lot of people had usernames that kept them totally anonymous, but there was kind of a code of respect, if you will, that nobody could violate, or if they did, they wouldn't last long there. So it really was a safe space, as much as I feel like that phrase can be a bit cliche these days. I think you're spot on in describing that environment. And another key piece of it that I'll bet really resonated with you would be Dave's penchant for classic rock and queuing up the jukebox. So Adam, I'd love it if you could describe how that shared passion of both betting and classic rock added to your experience reading Dave's work and interacting with him when you have the chance to do so.
Yeah, 100%. So, my two loves in life are music and sports. Always has been. And it's weird. Some people on one end of that spectrum don't like the people on the other end of that spectrum, or they don't have a lot in common. So early on, when he was talking about music, I'm like, oh, this is, I can talk about, because while I may not have been up to speed on all the betting stuff, although, unique stuff, I could talk circles about, certain genres of music. And I know a lot of, I play music, been in bands, stuff like that. So we had some common bands of interest that obviously we found pretty quickly. And so I just, there's nothing more I like better than talking music with my betting friends, who have the similar passions for both. That was one of the greatest things I felt about Dave, is just getting into these other subject matters. Really just kind of helps the whole vibe of the whole situation.
Yeah, that reminds me of the first time I met him. It was for lunch in October of 2015 in Vegas, a few minutes off the strip. And it was at a time where the NFL season was picking up steam, NBA, NHL were just getting started, Major League Baseball in the middle of the World Series. I figured I was lucky if Dave was going to give me the time of day for an hour, if that. And it turned into a multiple hour affair. But I came with a pen and a pad of paper because I thought I was going to take scrupulous notes from this professional bettor I was meeting, and it was just going to change everything about how I approached betting on sports. It was hard to get in a word about betting because he wanted to talk about anything else. He was so well rounded, and I know that that passion for music really struck a chord with you. And Adam, one thing I didn't know as you shared that answer was your own background in music. I'm curious as to what instrument or instruments you play or played, and what your favorite music was to play if you were inspired to cover other people's songs.
Sure. So I play guitar. I've been playing for a long time. I want to do a little shout out to Rob Pizzola real quick. He had a real interesting podcast this last week. You know, at the very beginning, he talked about music. In fact, when I met Rob the first time, that's what we would have talked about was music, guitar. I wanted to see what he was into because I knew he played. But music and the love of music really has helped me in my life in some of the darkest times to, you know, get focused, get away from some things. So music is very therapeutic. So I recommend to anyone, you know, if you're going through some things and there's some music that you are passionate about, it is a great way to free your mind and just kind of ease all the troubles of the world, you know, if you can get lost in that. As far as the type of music, I mean, I'm sure most people know know who I am. I'm a Deadhead. I've been, you know, I discovered the Grateful Dead at 18 years old, and it changed my life as well. I love the Allman Brothers, so I do love classic rock. I kind of like. I know this whole Grateful Dead thing, Fish has turned into this jam band genre. It's pretty good. I like improvisational music, so I like jazz. I like old blues. You know, Honestly, I was so into the Dead when they came out. The whole grunge thing, I wasn't even paying any mind to it. Hip hop came out, I couldn't pay it any mind. So I did lose probably some of that thing, you know, picking up those nuances and getting into those genres. But, you know, everything I needed or wanted was kind of available to me at Grateful Dead shows and with those kind of group of people. I think I gravitated towards older people too. And they were pretty cool with the young kids, kind of, you know, teaching them stuff, sharing stories with them, not, you know, copping attitudes like, what are you guys doing here? You know, that was a huge influence on even the way I want to, you know, I try to teach younger people that I'm talking to about whether it's music, whatever it is, you know, to really kind of, you know, not put them down for what they don't know because they're young, you know, just try to share some experiences and see what happens, you know.
Yeah, well said. And one subtle thing you let off there, I think you mentioned the first time you met Rob, bonding over music. I think that's such a good networking tip, is not to maybe go for the obvious if you're meeting somebody who's well known in a certain circle for the first time. An extreme example would be if you meet Michael Jordan, the last thing you should probably talk about with him, if you want to be memorable, is basketball.
Right.
If you come across somebody like Rob, music is a great in. I remember at the first Bet Bash, I was a little starstruck to find myself next to Rufus Peabody, but at the time he had started opening up more about mental health. So we had a great conversation about that. If somebody finds himself next to somebody like Roxy Roxborough at Bet Bash, maybe ask him about Thailand before you go straight to sports betting. If you see Alan Boston, talk about dogs instead of college basketball. There are different ins with different people. If you just maybe do a bit of homework to strike up a much more impactful conversation. So I love that the first time you met Rob, it wasn't just, oh my gosh, you're this incredible sports bettor. Like, yes, that's true. And hopefully we'll get there, but also there's more to it than just that.
Definitely. Yep. No, I think you're right on there as far as the whole networking tip is finding common areas, different things that, you know, there might be interest. That's great friendships have been made that way.
Indeed. And I bet, Adam, as a self-proclaimed deadhead, that you've struck up plenty of friendships over the years in that sense. In fact, I recall you sneaking away from Bet Bash to catch Dead and Company at the Sphere this past August. And I find it fitting that we're having this conversation on the day that it was announced Dead and Company coming back to the Sphere for 18 shows, I think it is, in the spring. And Adam, I know that minus 1,000 might seem like a very steep price for just about any proposition, but I'm wondering if that would be a short price if I'm just at odds that you will be in attendance when Dead and Company gets back to the Sphere.
They're taking that bet off the board, I'm afraid, my friend. I will be there. In fact, I want to just say this to anyone who loves music. I've seen the Grateful Dead, the original lineup, about 125 times, and a bunch of other band, lineups they've had since Jerry died. I've been to thousands of concerts at thousands of venues on the West. I'm a West Coast guy, so I haven't been to the East Coast, primarily. But the Sphere is so amazing. The sound and the experience is like nothing you've ever seen. It's a game changer. So if any band that you like plays there, I know it's expensive. You got to go because you won't regret it. And it's like nothing you've ever heard and seen. So I just want to, I can't recommend it enough.
Well, if you've seen The Dead and its variations 125 times or so, and maybe 1,000+ shows, this might be a really tough question. But Adam, I'm going to put you on the spot. What comes to mind first as I ask you about the best live music experience of your life so far?
Ooh, that's a close one. So my first concert I ever went to, I was 10 years old. My parents took me to see Johnny Cash at the Circle Star Theater in San Carlos. We were in like the second row. I believe that moment kind of planted the seed. Now, my family, we were always playing music, played piano and stuff. But I really felt like that planted the seed for the whole live music. Like it was just so incredible. Probably the coolest show I ever saw was in 1986. Jerry Garcia fell into a diabetic coma. And, a lot of people thought maybe the band was going to be over. And he had to kind of relearn playing guitar from the damage done by that. And prior to the Dead was getting better to play shows in December and do their annual New Year's run, the Jerry Garcia band, which was like a rhythm and blues style band, was playing at the Stone in San Francisco. And I mean, this place holds like 200, 250 people. I still have the ticket stub. It was a $10 ticket. And it was the most amazing night of my life, just because the intimacy, what he was going through, how excited the fans were because the band was, getting back together where, shows are, New Year's shows are coming up in 2 weeks. It was incredible. And that was probably the coolest thing I've ever seen. I've probably seen just about every band you could think of, from the classic rock era, that was alive, when my time, with my age was appropriate. I'll give you a quick real side note. I was a hard rocker before I became into Dead. And the Scorpions' Love It First Sting tour started on the West Coast. I went to the Cow Palace, and there was a new band that opened for them called Bon Jovi. And they were booed off the stage before they could get through like 3 songs. So there's an era where like they would put like these really kind of crappy bands as the openers. And I don't know, it just seemed to be that way. I remember, Van Halen yelling at the crowd. It was just a weird time in these big arena concerts. But literally, their debut album came out like within the next few weeks. And by the end of that tour, I think that album was topping the charts, and they were like a big band. So it was just a wild to imagine seeing these guys get booed off the stage, and they turned out to be such a popular group. So that was kind of weird.
Yeah. That's a great side story, and it seems like you've just about seen and heard it all. So, Adam, it's also interesting that we're talking not only the day of the Dead and Company announcement coming back to the Sphere, but also on Spotify Wrapped Day. And I'm wondering, if you didn't already own such an extensive library, what do you think Spotify Wrapped would identify as your top artist and your top song of the year 2024?
Well, I mean, my top artists are going to be the Dead and the Allman Brothers, no matter what,
No matter what year it is, sure.
Because, I mean, the beauty of the Grateful Dead is they had the best sound systems going. In fact, a lot of things that we do in live recordings now, in concert venues, are all things that the Grateful Dead sound basically came up with, and everybody's incorporated. I mean, these big stadium shows, how you can get good sound throughout the audience, that's all the Grateful Dead that came up with these ideas and these concepts. So, I mean, if you're going to just talk, those are my top 2. And then I like a lot of other things, but as far as a song goes, so when you're a Deadhead, there's all these eras of shows, and they recorded everything. So that's what keeps them alive to this day. They come out with releases still 4 times a year that are concerts from their whole catalog that have been remastered and, sound incredible. So I was on a trip with this song called Playing in the Band. It's one of these long jam songs, and based on what era you're talking about, they it would either be it could be as long as 45 minutes long sometimes.
Wow.
When the studio album came out in 70, it was only a 4-minute song, and then it turned into this total jam. So something was tracking my songs. I bet you, because I was on this kick with this song this summer, trying to find my favorite version of it. So that probably would have been the song that would have been played over and over. And then a lot of times I'm going to learn a song, so I'll just be overdosing on that particular song, trying to pick it up and play it for, or whatnot.
Got it. Yeah, that reminds me of a colleague of mine shared his Spotify Wrapped top 5 songs of the year, and he had Going Down the Road multiple times, same song in the top 5. It blew away a lot of us, but I guess if you're a Deadhead, that would make perfect sense, because it just could depend wildly on which version of the song we're talking about from time to time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this whole Spotify Wrapped thing is probably not appropriate for a person like me, because honestly, I'm a little tunnel visioned at sometimes when it comes to what I want to listen to, and
Sure.
that can be a strength on one hand and it's a weakness on the other, but it's kind of whatever, floats your boat or what you're in the mood for.
Yeah, very fair. I like to think that I have a pretty well-rounded taste in music to an extent, but while I don't have any Dead or Allman Brothers standing out as far as my rap goes, I will share my top song this year was Wild Thing by X. That caught me a bit off guard, but I think the key is that several artists have recorded the song. I finally found the right one and latched on, because this is a direct connection to Major League, is my favorite movie. Adam, does Wild Thing by X resonate with you in any way whatsoever?
Oh, yeah, that's an all-time classic. Are you kidding me? Yes. No, we love that song.
All right, and speaking of all-time classics, my top artist, Bruce Springsteen. So to this day, safe to say, Dave's fingerprints remain all over my music listening habits, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's awesome.
Adam, as we round the corner here, want to wrap up with 2 final questions to close up this very special Malinsky Minute. It's easy to make this a Malinsky Hour with you, so we'll have to keep this going next time we convene on this show. But to wrap up this conversation, I'll start with this. What's one thing you learned from Dave about sports betting that has stuck with you all these years later?
So if you don't mind, I printed this out from something I copied, and there was a user on the SBR called Money with No Cash. I don't know who he was, but me and him could have been best friends, I believe. So he was excited to talk to Dave about some music stuff, and he was talking about stories he'd gotten passed down from going to the Grateful Dead. So at their shows, they have this thing called Shakedown Street, which is like a flea market where the people who are traveling around the country are selling tie-dyes and different things. And it's basically a pregame party spot for everybody, going. And he talked about them sharing with the younger people, changes the band, just kind of the stuff I talked about earlier. And he loved, there's a song called Tons of Steel, which is basically a train is rolling down the track with no brakes. And he was using it as an analogy that this would be the definition of a book for a sports handicapper. And Dave's response to that was, this is just classic. He said, this is not a sports forum. This is a how to win at sports betting forum. That means incorporating a lifestyle into play that puts someone in a position to win, to find outlets for energies beyond betting the boards. When you have something via art, music, literature, or some sort of physical activity that helps you clear both your mind and increase your capacity to learn and process information, then you've taken a big step toward winning. I mean, that to me is gold right there. And then he comes back with this and says, the reason why the music of the Grateful Dead resonates so well here, it's about dealing with adversity, accepting challenges, and accepting the greatest of those challenges can't be beaten with a single action, but they require a long process. Very much like trying to beat the betting boards each day. So that I can't say anything better than that,
That's remarkable, and I'm probably one of many who tends to listen to podcasts anywhere from 1.5x to 2x speed, but that excerpt you just shared, I think, warrants listening to multiple times at 1x speed and really letting it marinate. Adam, I was going to wrap up by asking you one thing you learned from Dave, not about betting, that has stuck with you, but I feel like it might be safe to assume that you just answered both of those questions with that phenomenal read of the words of David Malinsky.
Right on.
All right, so on that very high note, we will go ahead and wrap up this conversation. To the audience, thank you for tuning in. Best of luck with your Week 14 bets. If you're following the plays Adam and I discussed, might be a bit of a heavy card for the Thursday night game, so hope all goes well to kick off Week 14. Friendly reminder, you can follow Adam on Twitter at aorphan67. Adam, it's always a joy on multiple levels whenever we get to connect. Thank you for the time and insight you've brought to this conversation. Looking forward to being in touch and to seeing you next summer once again in Las Vegas, if not sooner.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.